I was really interested in your difference. I had never read anything like this before. Your difference between having high standards, which you have, and perfectionism, which you say you don't have, and that you believe perfectionism to be one of the most toxic traits of all. Could you explain a little bit about why you think it's so dangerous? And is it more common in women?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I've just seen this in my decades of working with people, particularly women. We are so hard on ourselves about everything, particularly when it comes to creative projects. So working on a particular book or a product or something you want to present to your company or something you want to share with the world, like a piece of art. I've seen so many women have these just brilliant ideas. And again, I've seen this in men too, but it seems to be a little more prevalent in women. That's just been my observation. Where if it's not perfect, if it's not meeting these standards, these external expectations where they're comparing themselves to people they admire or something that they've seen before, they hold it back. They work on it for years. I've talked to people like, I'm like, weren't you working on something like 2 years ago? Whatever happened with that? They're like, oh, I'm still, it's making it perfect. It's coming back here. And I just think it makes us miserable. We never ship. We never get to share those things that are meant to make a difference to other people. It keeps us spinning our wheels. And I think it keeps us in a place of comparison, which is creative kryptonite and happiness kryptonite. I don't know. Have you experienced this, Pandora? If you're sitting in a place and, you know, whether it's you're looking at another journalist's work or another podcast's work, and you start to notice their popularity or anything that you might admire in them or appreciate in them, the moment it slips into this place where you're like, I'm not good enough yet, my thing is not ready to send out into the world, or I'm not perfect, I just think people go down into a really dark place and they stop focusing on the contribution they can make and just start focusing on these weird things. Again, like how to be perfect, whatever that means. And as we talk about in the book, there's a lot of research and study that shows, and this was quite disturbing. I didn't know this until I actually researched it in the book. But for people who die by suicide, there have been certain studies where they've interviewed the family members after. And one of the most common threads that is reported from family members after is perfectionism. People feeling as though this particular family member who they lost could never match up to their own internal expectations of how they should be achieving or what they should be in the world. And this person that we no longer have, all of them, they were brilliant, they were loving, they were creative, and yet there was something happening there. And so when I started to read those studies, again, we have all the science and the research cited in the book, so you can check that out. It really struck a chord within me about when you take that notion of perfectionism and it gets to an extreme, just how destructive it can be, not just for yourself, but for the people that you love.
I found that really confronting because that is something that I have struggled with, not comparisonitis, which you were speaking about and writing about, but the kind of holding yourself to a certain prediction. You're trying to always predict how things will land, I think, what you were writing about. And something I think is really interesting, and again, this speaks to your own life experience of training to be a life coach for 7 years while doing jobs on the side that weren't careers. They were very much in order to get the money so that you could build your life coaching business. And I also wonder a lot about whether or not this is a generational thing, because I feel anecdotally like I see this more in women in their 20s now. But you talk a lot about how we have to cultivate patience. And I wonder sometimes, particularly when I look at younger women, if we've lost the ability to value delayed gratification, not because, you know, they can't be bothered, but because they're sort of media and the way in which the world is set up now, it's all geared around the immediate or the short term. And this feels a bit ironic, me asking you this now, because I'm actually really trying to live in the immediate at the moment and not think too far ahead, because it feels really pointless when we don't know when the pandemic will end. But leaving aside that specific detail, how can you encourage people, particularly some of our younger watchers, to I guess, rise above that kind of pain of knowing that you won't necessarily have loads of exciting things to relay to your friends and family. You won't have interesting things to post on social media. You won't necessarily feel day by day like you're achieving all these explosively exciting things. How do you focus when our society is really not geared this way on 7 years ahead? Like, I wouldn't be very good at doing that. I'm not even talking about people in their 20s. I don't think I'd be very good at doing that either.
This is a great nuanced discussion. I just want to acknowledge a couple of things that both can exist at the same time. So here's what I mean by that. I love that you shared that right now you're very immediate focused. There's a certain amount of uncertainty that we're all navigating through. And so to practice saying, well, what works right now? Let me engage in whatever's in front of me right now, because we cannot predict this, right? So there's so much value and wisdom in that. There's also wonderful training in that. And coming over to this other side of it, technology, I believe, has played a major role in what you were describing, which is perhaps a notion. And I think, by the way, though, too, we can, on one layer, say maybe technology has either accelerated or amplified that impatience that young people have. But I will raise my hand to this. While I grinded it out because there was a deeper part of me that understood the value of building something long-term, and a lot of that came from my family values, I was so impatient, Pandora. I felt like when I was 24, and I'm not kidding you, if I could like go back and gently smack 24-year-old Marie, I would definitely do it. She felt like she was over the hill. She felt like,
me too. No, I definitely was like that too.
oh my gosh, I was horrible. I even think back now, like, 27 or 28-year-old Marie was like, why isn't it all happening already? Like, it was just, so I think that's part of our, not everyone, of course, don't want to generalize, but for many of us, the 20s are just so filled with so much angst and wanting to be somewhere and not quite there yet and trying to navigate and find our way. So I think that there's two things that we can do. And this was one that this first tip really transformed things for me when I was bartending my face off, to be honest with you, because that was where the money was coming from. It was how I kept a roof over my head. It was how I kept food on the table. And it comes back to what we were talking about before. I realized that I was developing this really crappy habit of being miserable at my bartending job because I was thinking, my coaching practice should be taking off by now. You know what I mean? I should be writing books right now. Like, why am I not where I should be? And I was like, this is the dumbest thing ever. I'm spending like 8 hours a day bartending, training myself to be miserable so that in the few hours after I'm bartending, I can be a happy life coach. Like, that makes zero sense. It makes zero sense logically. So I set a new standard for myself, which was this. I was going to go into bartending like it was a party every day. Like, I was going to be the best bartender, making those best damn drinks, making people happy, telling them stories, even telling them about my coaching practice, because people in New York at that time, they're like, oh, what are you, an actress? I'm like, no, I'm a coach. Do you want to sign up for my newsletter? That's what we did with the yellow legal pad back in the 90s, early 2000s, I should say. Anyway, my point is this. If you're in your 20s or you're in a stage in life where you're navigating and you're trying to figure it out, don't complain your way through it. It's an adventure. There will come a point in the future where what I call a convergence happens, where all of your disparate, seemingly disparate jobs, experiences, paths that you go down are going to converge into something. And only in retrospect will you be able to look back and see the brilliance of your path. But you never are able to see it while you're in it. So you can either be miserable, what I not suggest, or you can bring as much joy as possible if you know this is the thing you got to do to put food on the table to get a paycheck while you figure your ish out. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. And a very fair defense of 20-year-old women who did not mean to diss. And I completely accept that I was exactly the same impatience in my 20s. I just didn't have Kylie Jenner to look at and see that she built $1 billion beauty brand by 21, which I'm thankful for. I can't imagine seeing that and not feeling like, well, why haven't I done that? But before we go to questions, I wanted to end by asking you what success looks like to you, because I think it's something that we tended to look at in professional terms, but that perhaps this year more than ever, we're starting to look at in a more holistic sense. I know a lot of people who have thought, okay, well, when we're out the other side of this, I need to move house, or I need to change jobs because my life is not set up in a way that makes me feel successful. And so I'm really interested to hear what success looks like to you, Marie, the individual, and also Marie, the life coach. Is it the same thing? Are there differences between them?
Well, I usually tend to kind of lean into personal life and professional life just as a way to organize things for myself and to have like different spheres to play in when I'm dreaming. And on a personal level, for me, it really is about joy. I think it was November just this year, I had to have an emergency surgery. I had to have an emergency hysterectomy. We found this grapefruit-sized tumor outside my uterus that was very disturbing. We're like, what the hell is that? That needs to get out immediately. And it was like, oh, it's a global pandemic. Oh, great. This is fun. So I share all that to say that for 6 weeks, I couldn't exercise. I couldn't lift anything. Like I had to fully recover from this surgery. And so now I'm just on the other side of being able to get back to my normal personal life. So joy and movement, I know that sounds so simple, but it is like total success for me to be able to be grateful to use my body. I'm a dancer by nature. And so to be able to move again, like it could bring me to tears, how grateful I am to that. So success for me is just like the simple joys, cooking, moving, being with my man. We do like puzzles and stuff, like silly things, but that's success for me. The professional journey, to be really honest, it is helping to get this book out. It's like, I have worked my entire life doing this for 2 decades. I'm super proud of what we do. But the accolades in a traditional sense, they're only important because they help me get the message out to more people, if that makes any kind of sense. I've been around the block enough times to know, like, you hit something and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful. That is so amazing. But it doesn't transform. You don't wake up every day going like, I'm a #1 New York Times bestseller. Like, it doesn't make the quality of your life different. All that matters to me is, how can I reach more people and hopefully play some part in them awakening to their own power? So when I set professional goals, like that's usually the underpinning of like the impact piece. Because at this point in the game, I've done a lot of different things. And so the joy of creation and of touching people's lives in some way, that's what turns me on.
Well, a couple of side notes there is, #1 on the New York Times bestseller list is still pretty great.
Yes.
I'm glad to hear that you're feeling better. That's a very stressful thing to have gone through. I just want to jump to a few of the questions we've got here. This is a really interesting one, actually. I don't think we really touched on this. I'm so ambitious, and there are all of these amazing online courses and books. I want to take them all in. I want to read them all. But that is the problem. It gets overwhelming. How do you stay calm and focused without wanting to run so fast you can't keep up?
Yes. Well, okay. So first of all, whoever asked this, they need to celebrate. They sound like that person and myself maybe share a little DNA. We are lifelong learners. That's awesome. You have so much appetite for growth. You have so much ambition to create and do new things and to expand yourself as a human. So let's celebrate that. On a practical level, what I suggest is that you say yes to what is most immediately usable in your life. So for example, if there's a course you're like, oh my goodness, I definitely want to understand, how to do architecture with paper mache. And you're like, but I kind of want to deal with that when I'm in my 60s or 70s. Like I can see myself doing that at some point. Don't take that course now. Do not sign up for that course. Don't add that to your list. So only say yes to the books or the programs that are going to make the most immediate impact on your life, the things that you sense, and you have to go inside intuition wise, that are really, really going to help you take those next big steps ahead. The other ones, you can write them down, you can take notes on them. But I've found a lot of people have too many open loops. They're trying to do too much at once. And a mantra that I use that has helped me tremendously is simplify to amplify. If you want your results to explode, take on less. So rather than 5 courses, focus on 1. Rather than 10 books, focus on 1 or 2. That would be my perspective on that.
It's a long life. This one I think will resonate with a lot of people. The pandemic has dimmed the importance of things and can make you feel quite detached from everything. Do you have any tips for staying passionate and keeping that spark alive?
Yes. So this will be my personal perspective on this. I think that we underutilize the power of the physical body and also of music. I think those are two things that if you want your creative, passionate channels to stay open, you know, for this particular person asking the question, if cycling is what really lights you up, you know, either get an indoor bike, or if it's safe where you are to be able to bike outside still and have a mask on, do that. Do whatever you can to sweat, even if it's just 5 or 6 minutes a day. It does not have to be an hour. It doesn't need to be complex. You don't even need special equipment. You can do this with like jumping jacks and push-ups and just your body weight. But I have found over 2 decades that people largely underestimate the passion and creativity that lives in the physical vessel. And because our society is so sedentary and we spend so much time on these things, that we've lost touch with the genius and the intelligence that is our own body. So that's piece one. And piece two, I haven't done a deep dive into the research around this, so this is more instinctual and experiential for me. I find that music turns it up. You know, whatever the genre is that gets you fired up, whether it's oldies or current hits or whatever genre, makes you emotional, makes you feel something, whether it's pumped up, makes you cry, makes you angry, makes you fierce. Play that music and move that body. And I promise, if you did like 5 minutes a day for 7 days in a row, I would bet you money, or a coffee or a tea next time I'm in the UK, that you will start to get what I call downloads, start to get passionate, start to get ideas that you don't have to work for. They're just literally going to appear in your mental theater.
I love that. Those are two really easy takeaways, I think, as well, small things that we can start doing now. This is one that I imagine must come up a lot in your life coaching and may speak to your own experience as a stepmother. This is about motherhood. Can you talk a little bit about how women can navigate motherhood without losing their own creative agency and purpose?
Yeah. So admittedly, I'm not going to be perfect at this. You know, my stepson came into my life when he was 9 and he's now an adult. I think it's really important for every human being, but especially women, because we tend to carry a lot of the burden of caregiving for everybody. Sometimes that can be our significant others. Sometimes that can be other members of our family, of course, kids, also pets. We tend to be the nourishers. I think it's so important to carve out solo time. And I know this can seem really challenging, especially given the climate we're in. But I've had so many talks with friends, and I'm like, you need to be able to close a door. You need to be able to like put a little sign on the door. And even if it's a half hour or maybe an hour, and say, you know what, mom needs a little bit of quiet time. And if you need to negotiate with a partner or with a friend or someone, again, everything is figure outable. I am such a huge believer that people need solitude and need time and space for themselves. And again, it doesn't have to be extraordinary, doesn't have to be unrealistic. Even I've had friends of mine, Pandora, they're like, Marie, I've gone into the bathroom. Like I've gone into the bathroom.
Oh, that's a common one. Yeah.
I was like, close that door. That's okay. Like, let's embrace it. If the bathroom is where we need to be.
Doesn't work when they're tiny though. They like to sit on I've got a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old, and they like to sit on my lap and they like to flush the loo. But I agree, when they get a little bit older, I think apparently that works.
Yes. And then I would say when we start to all emerge from this, and everyone's life situation is very different, so we have to adjust this advice for ourselves. But I think it's imperative to put time in the calendar, like bumpers, for solo time. Someone who works with me, who's a genius, sometimes she will take a couple of days off and not tell her family, meaning not tell her husband and her, and there's child, do you know what I mean? But it's like, she doesn't tell them. She just goes and takes herself. She'll sit in a restaurant for the day. She might just go, again, nothing major, maybe just get her nails done or go take a walk. She lives near the ocean, go take a walk on the beach. And I'm like, I give her so many high fives. I'm like, don't you tell anybody. You need some peace and quiet for yourself. So however you can take that for you, you might say, you know what? I need to go shopping. We definitely need some things. You don't need anything. You just need a little bit of peace and quiet by yourself.
Marie Forleo, thank you so much. I cannot recommend Everything is Figure Outable enough. I think it's a real tonic for these times, and you have cheered me up and made me feel so galvanized in the last hour, and I bet all of our listeners and watchers feel exactly the same.
Thank you so much, Pandora, and thank you everyone for coming today. It was so lovely to be with you.